Phil Miles, and I lead the DoubleClick business here in the UK. And Paul talked there about the intersection between data, technology, and people as being the kind of the sweet spot where brands need to be in order to be successful in this area. And I'm really pleased to welcome JP from J&J, and I think getting a marketer's perspective on actually on this stuff is actually the key thing that we're going to try and get through in the next 30 minutes. So, Jade, why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about your role at J&J and how your team fits into the wider marketing department?
Yeah, of course. I'm just, first of all, pleased I've navigated the stairs to get up here, so I'm winning already. So my name's JP. I'm a group marketing manager in Northern Europe for J&J, and I have a specialist role. I work on media strategy and also programmatic, and I sit within a broader team of specialists. There's 9 of us. We have traditional offline marketing skills, we have digital strategists, we have a CRM manager, we have an analyst, and together we have 2 main functions within the business. The first one is to make sure that J&J stay on the cutting edge of technology. So it's our job to go out and find innovation and work out what's right for us as a large, complex organisation. And the second is to drive capability within the marketing team. So we have 70 marketeers in Northern Europe, and it's our job to train them in what they need to do to deliver the innovation, if you like.
And, you know, I suppose one thing I'm fascinated by is how did a traditional brand like J&J decide to put data, technology and people right at the heart of your marketing strategy?
Good question. So we all have business challenges, and I would think there's probably a lot of people in the room that have the same business challenges that J&J do. We're a global healthcare brand, and every year we need to make our media dollars work harder and harder for us. And that pressure gets more and more intense in the current economic climate. So for us as a healthcare brand, quite often we are looking to target quite niche audiences or silver bullet audiences. So just an example, how many people in the room are trying to give up smoking at the moment? Hands up. So we've got a couple, 3, 4. We've got 4 out of this audience. And how many have children under the age of 6 in the room? Okay, so a little bit more, that's good, but probably only about a quarter. Yeah. So our challenge with our healthcare portfolio and also our baby portfolio is to work out how we can reach these people in the most effective way. So when we look at traditional media channels, we see a lot of wastage within those channels because we have to target such broad audiences. So programmatic makes sense for us because and a data-led strategy, because we can then start to hone down on our key highest value audiences.
And in a lot of organisations, they've identified that data and technology is important, but perhaps kind of put that in a silo. What I think is fascinating about J&J is the way that you've got this centre of excellence, but you actually drive the execution really through the marketing teams. Absolutely. And you expect everybody in the marketing team to be able to, I guess, manage campaigns in this way from an end-to-end perspective. Could you just talk a little bit more about that? Yeah,
sure. So we expect the core competency of marketeers now to take on and run their own data-led campaigns. So for us, J&J, we feel, is quite unique in its ethos and its culture, and we have a real kind of sense of empowerment within as employees of J&J. So what's most important for us as a specialist team within the organisation is not if we win or the fact that we even exist. The success for us is when the marketing teams and the brands see success. Now, and that's how we're targeted as a team. So alongside the innovation, it's about driving those core competencies. And we expect our marketing team to be chomping at the bit, to be first, to put their hands up, to trial new stuff. And they get the kudos for that. They get the internal fame for doing that job for us. So really for us,
I like that idea of kind of chomping at the bit.
Absolutely.
I mean, I guess, are you in some ways like a sort of chief disruptor within the business? And I wonder how, I mean, for some people, this must have been quite a significant change, particularly people that have been in the business for some time.
Yeah.
How have you managed that kind of like that this disruption effectively? And has everybody been able to kind of go on the journey?
Yeah, I think they have actually. I think what you find in marketing now is that they know the expectation is that they're going to have to adapt to a changing environment. And very much, I've always seen my job as it may be programmatic and data this year, but next year I might be driving a different innovation. Yeah. And that's the type of culture that our marketeers need to take on, so that they're constantly learning.
So you've kind of had to embed almost a kind of culture of permanent change, effectively. Yeah. I mean, that's something I think at Google we're familiar with. It's kind of always in beta. Yeah. Do you think that's effectively the new normal for marketing?
Yeah, I think it is. We would most certainly look for these types of skill sets, and as well as encouraging it and developing it. But millennials are quite that way orientated as well. So I think for them it's, and I'm unfortunately not in this group, for them it's less about job titles and more about kind of skills that they can throw in their background. I don't think I'm even in the group after millennials, to be honest with you. I wasn't going to comment.
But I'd like to stay with skills if we could, because I think it's a good area to dig into. Could you talk a little bit more about the types of skills that you've had to kind of invest in, the new types of roles that you've had to develop over the last couple of years to be able, I guess, to kind of continue to deliver on the vision that you've got?
So I think statistically, we're the fastest growing team, probably in globally at J&J, off a very low base, I will say. But I kind of see this fusion, and I saw a panel talking about it earlier, about this left-hand, right-hand side of the brain, so logic and creativity coming together to be fused. And there are very few people that have that type of brain. You see a lot of people, and probably a lot of people in the room, who'll be more data-led than creative and strategy-led. But the people that really succeed in this space are the people that we have both. So what we've done is not only we've brought in some great people to start with, but we've also kind of grown our talent base. So we've tried to look for people who have this skill set internally and move them into roles that best support their learning, which we're super passionate about, developing our people. So our CRM manager, actually, we've broadened his role out, which might not be necessarily a traditional space where you would find somebody for that left-hand, right-hand space, but he's brilliant. And the reason he's brilliant is because we've looked at his skill set rather than where he sits in the business or where somebody might pigeonhole him, and we've kind of developed him in a new way, and I think that's also what's really special about J&J. So
you've almost like created roles that wouldn't have been there a year ago, with kind of like and people can fill those roles as things are moving so quickly.
Absolutely.
My perspective on this, and I obviously work with hundreds of brands across the UK, is that while there's a lot of focus on technology, and obviously, I'm not going to suggest that technology isn't important. Certainly, the guy that leads DoubleClick's not going to say that. But fundamentally, I've always seen success. The real key factor of success is the people fundamentally that are driving that technology, and technology is only as good as the people that run it. Was that something you would support and agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in our specialist team, we put in the governance, we put in the tech stack, we put in the process, but that is only as successful as how good our marketeers are at activating the campaigns through all of that. And it's getting, quite often it's just helping them manage the complexity and putting a process in place that makes sure they can focus on the really important stuff while we do the framework and that kind of governance piece behind the scenes. Okay.
That also nicely leads on to my next question, actually, which is, what about the skills and of the partners that you're working with in the so the broader ecosystem of creative agencies, media agencies? You've been on a big change.
Yes.
That's disruptive within your organisation. It's also disruptive for them. How well have they adapted to that change?
Yeah, I think as an industry we're getting there. Yeah. I think the biggest change, though, for our partners has been working together. Right. So if you think back, 5, 6, 7 years ago, you'd had a real one-to-one relationship with your media agency. And now when we brief campaigns, our media agency, J3, you do a great job for us at the centre, but the marketing team have to brief our tech partners, our media agency and our creative agency all in one session. Take them through the journey, the strategic journey of building a campaign, manage all of that, get the creative out the door, then manage the performance, optimise as we go, balance their KPIs. So actually, it's become, from a client perspective. You have to get way more hands-on, and they're the types of skills that you need, I think, as a marketer.
Really strong, like, organisation or project management skills probably kind of coming into it.
Yeah, as well as the strategy side.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And getting everybody in the boat effectively has kind of been the kind of key part to kind of success. Yeah. I mean, I was actually going to ask a question. So, do we have any entrepreneurs in the audience? No? 2 entrepreneurs in the audience. So, is there, based on the journey you've been on, for the 2 entrepreneurs in the room, is there any business opportunities that you see for kind of like new services or new service providers that you don't think are currently being provided in the marketplace around this space? Like, if you were starting a business in this world today, where would you start it? And somebody has to go and start a business as a result of this, okay?
It's difficult to answer without putting myself out of a job, isn't it? That question.
Jane Potter Inc.
Yeah. I would definitely say part of it is in understanding the complexity and helping companies understand that complexity and the governance they need to put in place. But absolutely, I think we spend a lot of time on training, and we do a lot of that training internally. So definitely, if there was somebody to come along and help us with that and help train our people, that would be great.
Okay, great. So look, I think we've had a good set of questions there around the people and skills piece. I'd like to focus now on actually how you're using data within the organisation. So, in terms of like how you turn that data into and that strategy into marketing campaigns. Now, I know your core audience is mums. Can you talk a little bit about how you've used data along the digital journey to engage with this sort of core demographic?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to caveat it with it's mums/parents who are interested in the health and well-being of their children. So for us, we don't have a massive amount of first-party data. We're not in finance, we're not a travel company. So for us, we harvest the very valuable gems from our first-party data. So our CRM, our websites, and also our what we call Caring Every Day, which is our scale program that brings our brands together. And then we have to use third-party data to help cut down and target that audience, that kind of really specific audience I was talking about earlier. So when we think about what's right for mums, once we've kind of got a pool of who we think looks like a mum, we then overlay tactics to try and find her in the right place in the journey. So that might be contextual, geolocation, it might be TV sync. And once we've set up those tactics, we then layer in our dynamic creative. So, I mean, it's the classic right message, right time, right consumer, but actually it's quite a complex system by the end of going through all those processes. So just to give you a couple of examples, if we know a mum is near a store or in the vicinity of a store, we're much more likely to drive her to an offer-related message. If she's at home at 3 a.m. trying to get her baby to sleep, she doesn't want an offer-based message. What she wants is, maybe a piece of our kind of longer form video content about a bedtime routine that she can try. So we're trying really, really hard to pinpoint what she really needs in that moment and build a brand message that really resonates with her.
And what I love about your doing is you're also trying really hard to bring kind of the offline and the online together. They're not siloed, are they? Very much informing one another in your media strategy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we define roles of channels throughout, and we see them as complementary. So on the one hand, we use our kind of more digital channels to kind of silver bullet our audience and find them in the right time. That's always complemented with a broadcast strategy where we are building brand love and equity in that space, which is broader reach.
Yeah, okay. So you just touched on in your last answer context.
Yeah.
So in our business, we tend to think about data very much through the lens of audience. And I'd be interested to understand how you balance audience and context with your marketing.
So this is a good question. I think it's something that's ever evolving at J&J and probably in the industry. So I'll give you a personal example. I'm a working mum. And when I get home in the evening and I've spent a couple of hours wrestling to put my daughter to bed and I sit on the sofa and have a glass of wine, am I always in the right state of mind to have a child healthcare related message? No, I'm probably not actually. And if I'm researching my latest pair of ski boots that I'm dreaming about purchasing, what I really want in that moment is 50% off ski goggles, quite honestly. So I think this is where, as an industry, we need to get more clever. And I think the thing for me is it's more important to understand when not to target somebody as it is to understand when to target them.
Yeah, okay. And possibly the kind of like, more blunt focuses around audience without thinking about the kind of, so it's the right person, but is it the right time actually is the thing that you're talking about. So again, lovely setup for the next question, which is about then the right message, okay, which is obviously the third part of the holy trinity of this space. Paul talked about this quite a bit, and I mean, some people say that that programmatic or data-led marketing is a killer of creative. What's been your experience of mixing those disciplines? Have you been able to make it work?
Yeah, I think we have, and I'll use Calpol as an example. I think the thing that's really important here is I do actually see that a data-led strategy opens up a window to be more creative, but it's based on audience insight. So traditionally, we find one insight that's common about our whole audience, and I think that can sometimes lose the resonance for some consumers. Whereas if you think of your audience in cohorts, what a data-led strategy does is enable you to drive an insight for that cohort rather than everybody. And I think in that sense, it opens you up to much more creative opportunities. But it's still hinged on a great consumer insight.
Yeah, and on a great creative idea as well, to a certain extent. Yeah, I mean, in a sense, I feel that this is actually a great opportunity for creative agencies, because creative agencies have always been based around insights. It's just that they've tended to do more kind of like longer term research pieces that drive kind of a creative idea, and then obviously the execution. Whereas I guess now what's happening is it's all happening very, very fast, because you're getting lots of feedback very, very quickly, and that can obviously inform the creative message. So I guess there's more complexity in that for the creative agency. And how do you manage that complexity? I guess it's the challenge that you raised earlier.
Yeah, and I think that can be the overwhelming part, actually. And if you think about it from a brand manager's point of view, they might have hundreds of variations of their creative. We train them very well to build their decision trees out to be the most effective. But what they've also got to do is build an insight, build their data strategy, action it, but then they have to glean insight as well as they go. So I think that kind of constant cycle
of
feedback,
circle,
exactly, of insight, action, insight, data, action, insight, data, action. Yeah. That's when I think you can use data to help inform even richer insights that you can feed back into your creative.
So again, building on that, how do you plan differently in this world to the way that you would have done in the past?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Still, I think as an industry, we need to get better at it, but it is the pulling together of all of those partners up front to help you plan, actually. Yeah. So they're all informing. So what you can't do is, build a data strategy and then land it on a creative's desk to execute. What you can't do is take a great, creative and then try and chop it up. I don't believe into, tiny pieces where it kind of loses that brand love or brand equity. So I think it's actually pulling all those partners together and working as one team, client and agency and tech partners together.
I think this is, again, another area of real opportunity. I think a lot of the focus in this space has been around activation. But as it matures, I think the opportunity to really get kind of planning more engaged effectively with this kind of real-time marketing, I think is going to be the next wave what they're going to see over the next couple of years. Okay, so you don't. I'd be interested to know a little bit. Obviously, like this has obviously been a successful strategy for you. Otherwise, your team wouldn't be growing, and you wouldn't be obviously making the investments that you're making. Can you share a little bit at all about about that success and how you're measuring it?
Yeah. So this is a tricky one. We traditionally use econometric modelling, and pros and cons aside of econometric modelling, we have found a way to isolate the impact on our business metrics rather than just campaign metrics of moving to data-led strategy. And that's worked really well for us. So I can't share any more about how it's working for us, unfortunately, but we've definitely seen the benefits. Okay,
so it's working, but that's your secret sauce?
Yes.
Okay, if you were starting again, what would you do differently if you had your 2 years over again?
Yeah. So yes, we've been on this journey for 2 years. We were probably late to the party, actually, only being on this journey for 2 years. We spent a lot of time being a very complex organisation, and bear in mind you have to roll out the processes and your governance across 15 brands and 70 marketers. We spent a long time getting that process right and getting the relationships within our agency partners right, and making sure that we really stress test that. And we've come out of the other side of it, I think, with a great process. But I think if you actually focus there for complex organisations, getting that bit right, you could definitely cut down some of the time it took us up front. Yeah,
I think you're being hard on yourself, by the way, in terms of, I think you've actually been at the forefront of this. And I think probably the challenge is when you're doing something for the first time, actually, you're going to make mistakes. And that's kind of part of the process, I guess. You have to kind of, make some tests and learn from that. And that's kind of obviously, got you to where you've got to.
Yep.
So coming to the end, I've got, I think, one or two more questions. I suppose the next one is, we look back, what would you have done differently? What's next for J&J on this exciting journey?
So for us, I think it's leaning more into the data. We've got to find more of it. As I said earlier, for a CPG, we don't have a lot, so we're working really hard on how we can make the most of what we've got and find partners to help us build out on that. So it's really about this building more and more insights from data that can really impact our campaigns.
Okay, and so I could have asked this question at the beginning, but I've left it to the end. So data and technology are hot topics. Lots of conversations around these topics at Adweek this year and in previous years as well. From your perspective, is the hype justified?
So we have a phrase internally, which is the juice worth the squeeze, which we talk about quite a lot, which sounds strange. But the sentiment is the same. And for us on this journey, having found a kind of a way to make it work for us, I definitely would say it does. And that's because it really impacts on our business metrics. And if you can find a way to prove that out, then I think that's where it's really worth valued, not only to you, but to your senior and global management. So I think definitely for us, it's worth the hype. Sometimes the concept and the reality aren't quite the same, but that's where the people come in. And also, we're still, you're only 2 years into a journey that's probably going to last many, many more years as well. Yeah. My sense is that in this space, it very much depends who you ask in terms of whether the hype is justified. So I think it's like the quote where you say, the future is here, but it's not evenly distributed. For some brands, and I think it's particularly ones such as yourselves where they're really leaning into this space, really thinking about the people side of it actually as much as anything. Those are the ones that are really getting the great results, and I think are seeing the benefits. And there are others obviously that maybe are not doing that and maybe not feeling it as much. So I think there's definitely a lot of upside still and a lot of possibilities going forward. I have a flashing light in front of me, which means that our discussion is at an end. I just want to thank JP. It's been a really, really great session. I hope you